Right, let's see if this works this time. I've tried this a couple of times, and the first time I got a cold call and that paid to that, and the second time my tea was caught ready and that paid to that. I do wish OBS had a pause feature. Okie dokie. What I'm going to show here is basically my sort of workflow tackling meshes that I've pulled from various places which are in, shall we say, less than an ideal state for working with. I'm going to be using this one as an example. Anyone who knows anything at all about Jerry Anderson knows precisely what this is. And I've chosen it for a number of reasons, and this thing I'm about to show now, which you're probably looking at the screen and seeing, is the first thing, and that is when it first came in, when I first pulled it in from the Collada file, which in some form or another at some point came from SketchUp, it's got 12,600 objects, and as you can see from my text there, basically on my system Blender just became unusable. Blender no likey objects which are over sort of 10,000 individual objects. In fact, in my system, even anything over 7,000, and it starts to get into trouble. I did a lot of exploring, and that led me to discover that out of those 12,600, nearly 12,300 of them were 2-point polys. So I ended up writing a small script called delete 2-point objects, which looked for objects which were 0 polys, 1 edge, 2 points. The actual script itself deletes them if it finds them. For this instance, I just copied them to another layer so I could show you what I discovered. I don't know if this video will highlight it, but there is actually one highlighted edge there. That's a separate object. Every single point on this is another object, and even in 2.8 Blender still can't handle lots of individual objects. Now if it's an array, if you're using an object with an array modifier which starts to get into the thousands, it handles that quite gracefully. You can have a really heavy array modifier and it'll still react. Try to turn them into individual objects, like going into edit mode, and after you've applied the array modifier and separate by loose parts, one, it will take forever to do, and two, the end result is that Blender becomes unusable. So initially I was blaming the fact that there was all these 2-point polys, but it turns out it's just the sheer number of polys, because I joined them all into one object and lo and behold it's fine. As I say, normally I just delete them, so boom, I'll delete them. My little script that I did initially was, as I say, looking for 0 polys, 1 edge, 2 vertices. In the end I thought, I'll just delete it if it's got no polys and have done with it. And I will include this script in the link below, plus various other scripts that come in handy with this. So what that left me with was this, which, as you can see now, at least it's usable, although the mesh itself doesn't look usable. Right. So the first thing I do with something like this, and again it varies by model, is the first thing I'll do is I'll make sure they're all single user, because if I just expand this, you can see it says instance, and so first thing I'll make them single user. Next thing is I will apply rotation and scale, because all the scaling's off whack. After that I will do a origin to geometry for everything, so they all line up, and immediately you can see where a lot of these things are. Like for example in here, all those fins are individual objects instead of a single one. So having done that, what I'll do then is I will do an Alt P, select everything again, Alt P, clear and keep transformation, select one of the empties, do a Shift G, select by type, so all empties are selected, and I'll delete them. And I should really put my screencast keys on, shouldn't I? Let's just make the text a bit bigger and the mouse a bit bigger so you can see what I'm doing. So that's the first thing I do. The next thing I do is I use another little script of mine, rename UV map. For a simple reason. If we go in here, if we just zoom in into this for now, go into wireframe mode, we look at the mesh, you can see every single mesh has its own UV name, which means when you start joining things together you get multiple UVs on the one mesh. And as far as I'm aware, and I've never been able to find this out, someone correct me if I'm wrong, if you've got multiple UV slots you can't combine them to become a single UV slot. I've never found it. I've googled enough but I've never found it. Anywho, so all this does is bump renames every UV map to UV map. Simple as that. It's a tiny little script. It's not doesn't do a lot, but it does save a lot of heartache down the road. Right, I then go into material view because it makes it easier to work for what I'm doing, and then the next thing I do is I make use of the UV editor window a lot. So if we take this for example to start with, so wireframe, what I tend to do is I'll hide this, hide them, and hide them, because I know that makes up an engine. I'm not bothering with that because I'm just going to mirror it once it's done, because I can, it's something handy. So I'll do that and move that to another layer so I can work on it in isolation. I set that to visible layers, and you can see even in this instance just how many objects there are. That's a lot of objects for what is comparatively little. Right, so the next thing to do is we start looking at why it's in this state. Now I know from personal experience with this particular model, and I've come across it in a couple of others, it's all to do with the multiple materials. Now if we go in here, the first thing I do is set this to sync, and you look at that and you think, well, that's great, it's UV mapped, it's all fine and dandy. However, I don't know if you can see it there, but this is the problem. And it's, if we select these and hide them, you can see it still looks like we've got exactly the same geometry, and this is the error. This is the problem child, as it were. I don't know if you can just see that there. If I deselect and select it in the UV map, everything's at 0, 0. So I actually just call this dodgy so it stands out straight away, and as you can see it's used a lot. So I delete those vertices, unhide, everything's selected, and I'll do WR, and that, as you can see, gets rid of an awful lot of vertices, because you also find in this instance you get some loose geometry at times as well, and it's not immediately apparent because it's sitting exactly where the existing geometry is, and so you just do that. Now I do have a script called batch clean which would go in, it would merge vertices, it would set normals to consistent, it would convert tries to quads, then come out of edit mode. I've got these commented out at the moment because they do slow it down. Clean material slots, clear custom normals, and apply smooth shading with an auto smooth angle of 35 degrees. For this particular model, in this particular instance, because of this, you can't do that because it will end up trying to merge both and corrupting the UV map. So I don't use it in this particular model, but again I'll include it in my scripts. All the scripts I include are just things I've done for my own convenience. Use at your own peril, or take them apart and convert them to something you prefer. So anyway, the next thing for this is the fact that these are not quads. And what I do there is, having merged all the doubles, I'll do Shift G and select coplanar. That selects them. I'll then do Control T to triple it, and then Alt J to quad it, and that turns it into a really nice edge loop. Very tidy. So the same thing again. I've been playing with 2.8 and I keep going to press 3 to shift for face mode. The 1, 2, 3 is, I don't know why they didn't implement it in this. It's so much easier. So Control T, Alt J. There we go. So that's fine. Right, next thing is to look at the seams. You may not be bothered about this. I'm just showing you the whole process that I went through, so just stuff I've found. If I mark seams from islands, and I deselect everything, you can see that if we go into seam mode, they're all over the place. They're not what you'd expect at all, based on what you think you see in there. And the reason for that is, although you've merged doubles here within the mesh, what you've not done is merge doubles within the UV map. So wherever there's a split vertex in the UV map, it thinks there's a seam because the edge is discontinuous. So anyhow, I'll select them, and I've got a shortcut to clear UVs, to clear seams. So what I do for this is I basically just select that, then I'll go in here and I'll remove doubles. Now, using exactly the same WR, if your cursor's in the 3D window and you do that, it removes doubles on the mesh. If it's in the UV editor, it removes doubles in the UV editor. And the reason I'm selecting it by loop is because if I select everything and WR, you can see it kind of makes a mess of things. So I'm very specific about how I do it. So again, select that, WR. Now, even though you're doing it in here, that mesh threshold affects what goes on in here, not here, because you're working in here. You've got to be wary of that. It threw me initially, but once you got it in your head and it's pretty straightforward, then it's very easy actually, and it's laborious, but it gets the job done. So you just then keep that, and then I'll just align X, Alt click, align X, Alt click, align X, Alt click, align X. So that's that done basically. And then I have another little script which I normally run, and I've not loaded it up. Let me load it up. Boom, boom, boom. Where is it? Smooth and move. Normally I use this as I'm working on an individual piece. I'll work on it. Then when I'm happy with it in edit mode, I'll run this. It'll come out of edit mode, clean material slots, shade smooth, and shift it to another layer. Because I'm working with basically a multiple part item here, I don't want to move layers, so I've just commented them out and just run that. And I'm back in object mode. Right. Now, as you can see, it's removed the dodgy from there. And I also happen to know that for this particular model, all the image names are named the same as the materials. In this case I know it's an engine, so to make life simple for myself, I'm just call that engine and then just paste that to there. Right, so that's the first part of the engine done. I need to work on the other parts now. This bit, pretty straightforward. Again, I can just select them and I'll just make them one object. select dodgy, delete the vertices. There we go. I should really have not joined them until I'd done that to make sure I don't accidentally join parts that shouldn't be joined. But I can just, boom, there we go. I can go back in and that's that bit done. That's pretty straightforward and painless. This is the interesting bit. So I'll go in, same thing, select, delete. Now this, as you can see, it's with these here are supposed to actually have geometry for it. So what I'd do here is I'd select it. So I keep going to press 3. Oh no, first of all, WR. Now you see this is a perfect case. You wouldn't think that would remove 416 vertices because it didn't look like there was anything there. And that's just, well, I don't know, it's loose geometry that it's picking up. If we go into wireframe mode, go into, you can see all that loose geometry. And that's because when it's come in, instead of applying all of this as one object and then being tied, you've ended up with a flat plane and all of this. And to recreate those holes, I would just select the loose geometry. I don't need it. Delete them. Go back into wireframe. And I'll select the face and I'll inset it. And the reason I'm doing this is I want more control over where the cuts are going to be when I slice into it. If I just do this and cut through it, you can get very messy slices which, if you try to bevel, go off at strange angles and mess things up. So we can hide that. Alright, these two can be joined together. I'll hide that. Hide that. Select that. Invert. Select. Join. Unhide everything. Right. I'll hide those two again for now. Right, this one again. Select it. Delete the vertices. WR. Again, 224 vertices. You just wouldn't think it, would you? Now, in this instance, really, you could delete this face and try joining up the two edge loops, but that can mess up the edge flow of that. So what I do is I'll just inset that and get it as close as I can to the before deleting the face. Then I'll select them, WR, and just knock that up. And there you see that's removed them there. So that's good. Good. Job's done on that one. That's as much as I need to do. I can come out of there. And again, manually I can do that one. Bump. There we go. That'll do. Right. This is the interesting one. Again, go in. Dodgy. Select. Vertices. A8WR. Now I'll go into local mode, local view mode for this. Having done that, I'll select similar by length, and then Z6, 1, B, height, and what I'll do there is press F, and it'll put me a face on every single one of them, which is what I want. And I can invert that. Actually, let's do that to points, and let's invert it and delete those points. We don't need them. We only want a flat face. So unhide everything, and we're in object mode. Right. So I'll do a Shift S9 on that. Drag it forward a bit. So Shift select that. Go into edit mode. And I will do a knife project Then hit F and it turns them into things. EX, push them back. And that's that. I can delete them. And again with that, smooth. There we go. And that's that done. I can join these two. In fact, I can now join everything. So Control I, Shift that, and join. Didn't do that very well. Control I, don't, and join. There we go. And there's my engine. And right, as I say, I can move that back to layer 2 now. Don't need this one, we could delete this. It's all rubbish. Go into wireframe to make it easier to select. Delete them. Right, put the cursor to that. Cursor to selected. Select that, put the origin to the 3D cursor. Add a mirror modifier across the y-axis. And job's a good one for that particular thing. Save before I go any further. Now for a lot of it, it's just exactly the same process. So we take that. I'm looking at Auto 4, so Auto 4. And again, use nodes, image texture, Auto 4. Go into it, select dodgy, delete vertices, WR. Just check if there's any loose geometry. If there isn't, that's fine and dandy. Okay, we'll come out of that. That's that one done. Go into that one, do the same thing, select dodgy, delete vertices, A8WR, script. And I say it's all the same process now. Select, delete vertices, A8WR, run script. Again, you could build that into here if I took the batch clean, for example, and we say remove doubles. I can go to my smooth and move. Before my edit toggle, I can apply that. So if I go into this one, all I really need to do is go in, select, delete, A8, run script. Also 7 we can get to. Quick way of doing that, copy material, select that, paste material, and just change that to 7. Think, job's a good one. And the same with this. So we'll go in, and the initial run, same thing. Select dodgy, delete the vertices, A8, run that script, paste material, change that to 3. There we go. So that's stage 1 for that. So I can come in here, do a bit more work with this. And in this instance, there is a few things I want to do. So like that, for example, that's again another one. Go in, select, delete. There you are. So back to this one. Go in, and if I want to clean up the quads on this, I would actually do it via here. And the way I'd do it is I just deselect everything, select that, go back into here, do an Alt J, L, Alt J, L. This just means I've got a bit more control over how and when the Alt J is applying, it's not going where I don't want it to go, if you like. So again, just tidying up each time. So let's take that one. That one. That's on the back, so yeah, we'll have that. Right. And again, this is another one where if I were, you look at these initially and you think if you do a mark from seam that you would just get these tidy cuts, but I can tell you from experience that's not the case. So again, you've got to decide whether you want to make the effort of tidying the mesh up to that level, or you're content to leave it as it is. You know, there's only, you can do a certain amount yourself, but if we expand this, we go into edge mode, for example, you know, you could sort of like select these, then mark that as a seam explicitly there, with so on and so forth, you know. I mean, also the little things like this you can tidy up as well. So in this one there's a couple of things we need to sort out, and that is, if I take that, I'll make it a separate object for now. I'll come out, I'll hide that, and the reason I've made that a separate object, and I've just moved the origin to the geometry just to make it easier when I'm working, is I need to be able to cut this into it. So once again, select the dodgy, get rid of the vertices, A8, WR, and then Alt J for now, that'll do. And what I'll actually do here is I will take this face, duplicate it, and make it its own object. Come out, hide that, hide everything else, go into edit mode, make sure I've selected this second actually, and then go into edit mode, and again knife project, take that face, delete the face, unhide everything. Right, so I'll take that, take that, take that, join them, go into edit mode, oh, I've done the wrong thing there. I need to delete that face actually. I've joined the copy instead of joining the original. WR there to get rid of the points around the edge of it. So that's that one done. And the back one, it's slightly different. So again, what we will do is, I know I can get away with an edge select there. So I'll do a face. I will separate that by selection. I'm not bothered about the messed up UV there. I'll hide that. Select that. Go into edit mode. Select, delete, faces, A8WR. Right. And again, I'll go into edge mode, dump, face, select that as a selection. So, unhide. Oh, we're in edit mode. So hide that. Just pull that forward. Select that. 3. So we're only looking at them two. Again, edit mode. Again with the knife project, select the face, delete the face, and I'll actually project from view for this, and scale that down, or -90, and just stick it somewhere where the colour works. Right, unhide everything, again select that, delete that, don't need it now, select that, join, then I can select that, and join. Go into edit mode, WR, let's get rid of them, and then I would tend to do this just with a, make sure I've got just enough polys, and then do a W and R there, and that's that one done. And it's exactly the same process for everything else. 90% of it, it's going in, so I'm in there, I'll just manually delete that dodgy now. Smooth, auto smooth, oh, I'd already done it. It's just selecting something and altering it. Now in this case, what I would actually do, now they've all got the same UV map, each window is a separate window. There's a little thing called material relationship, a script somewhere. If I select that, you can see it selects all the dodgy ones, which we don't want. But if I select that one, that's just selected all the windows, so I can join them. Now my windows are all one object. So I can select the dodgy, delete the vertices, A8WR, let's go into point mode, let's make sure there are no loose geometry, there is not, so again, there, again auto 11, so paste the material, change that to 11, and there's your windows, and it's just that process then. So in a lot of instances, like here where you could select that 6, you can select all 6, join them up, go into edit mode, select them, delete the vertices, A8WR, and you can see that's a lot of vertices to remove. So we want 6, bump, and again paste, and change that to a 6. Run the script, and there you go. And again with these as well, you can look at things where you might need to go in and add extra bits like this. So if we go into here, that's not too bad actually, but you know, you can check on references and see where you think you're going to need to have a hole and where you're not. And if you carry on with that, eventually you will end up with something like that. Let me just hide that mesh, that's just for my, so there's the thing, I got the pod's a separate beast. I also put a shape key on the legs so they retract in, but it was all born, oh that's a little error on the that's an error on the UV map I need to sort out. So I went in and I edited that UV map, maybe not ideally, it could probably do with being a bit tidier, but it's close enough, and it does just show you what you can do using those processes I described before. Again, I did exactly the same thing with the pod. I'll just like that and shift hide everything else. Added a rotation point for the door, and on all the doors as well. It's got several doors. So, but same process. It's not rocket science. It's just laborious, but it does mean you can start to produce a decent model. And all I did was just add a cage, which everything's parented to, just so I can move it around if I ever get the desire to actually animate it. And that's pretty much it for that. I will be doing another video with a couple of different models where there are other issues to deal with, but this one was that unique in terms of the odd thing with the multiple materials and the loose geometry that I thought I'd show this on its own, and I'll do the others in a different video, which will probably be over the next week. I'll get to it, I'm sure, hopefully. I hope someone found this useful. If you did find it useful, do let me know. And next time, guys.